In today's video, we're going to cover the 13 most common interview mistakes that people make and how to avoid them. When you think about interviewing, it's almost always about the candidate and the impression that they need to make. But in reality, it's just as important for the interviewer to make a great impression.
Some reasons why you want to avoid these interviewer mistakes is because, first off, you want to make a good first impression. You want your candidates to come in really liking your company and having a good feeling that this is the place that they belong. It's also important because it helps you make accurate hires. It helps you to identify the skills and the personalities that you really want on your team. And avoiding these interviewer mistakes is a great way to do that.
And of course, you want to avoid potential legal troubles. Happens way too often in interviews, so we want to take that out of the equation altogether. So let's get right into it. Here are the 13 common interview mistakes and how you can avoid them.
So number one is showing up late. It's a really easy thing to avoid. Just make sure you're paying attention to your schedule. Make sure you're allotting enough time to actually have the interview if you're doing back-to-back ones. This is a really important one. It's a really good way to make a bad first impression. So make sure that you are showing up on time to your interview and respecting your candidate's time.
Number two, failing to understand the job that you're interviewing for. It happens frequently and it should never happen at all. It sets a terrible tone for the candidate. So the way to avoid that, make sure if you're interviewing, even if you're a recruiter who's not intimately familiar with the job, take the time to thoroughly read the job description, make notes, prepare your questions in advance, and if you need to, speak with the hiring manager who knows the position best. But always show up fully understanding the job that you're interviewing for.
I totally agree. And just like you should review the job description ahead of time, you should be reviewing the resumes ahead of time as well. When you interview somebody, it should not be the first time you are actually looking at their resume. You should know what types of questions you want to ask. You should at least have a general understanding of their background. So this is something that's really easy to avoid. Just make sure you take a little bit of time to look at the people that you are going to be speaking to.
The next mistake is being too lighthearted. It's a serious situation when someone is interviewing for a job. It's their livelihood. So it's okay to enjoy yourself during the interview, but don't take it too far. Don't make excessive jokes and don't get too comfortable with the interviewer who's probably nervous and they're certainly taking it seriously. So you should too.
And the other side of that is don't be too serious. While this is a professional environment and it's an important interview, you want to put your interviewee at ease.
So that may sound like a bit of a contradiction, but it's really not. Find the balance. You want to create a comfortable environment without one extreme or the other. And that's really the point.
The next one is make sure you aren't distracted. You should not be checking your phone. You should not be answering calls, texts, what have you, or looking at your computer screen while you are doing the interview. You should expect them to be taking it seriously and to be giving you their undivided attention, and you should reciprocate that. It's only respectful to make sure that while you are the person giving the interview, you are giving your undivided attention to your candidate.
And next up is avoid asking questions that are too vague or broad. You don't want to confuse the candidate. The way to avoid being too broad, prepare in advance. Preparation is key to a successful interview. That's a given. So write out relevant, specific questions in advance. You can go off script as the interview progresses, but don't stray too far from what you're there to do.
Make sure you're following a schedule. Not following a schedule is a common mistake that we see among interviewers. It's easy to give off a disorganized or unprofessional vibe to the candidates, and you really don't want that. You want to make sure that you are allotting time for technical questions, maybe soft skill questions. If you have other people that are going to be joining the interview, have all of that planned out ahead of time. And that's going to give a great impression to your candidate.
Another common mistake, interviewers too often will jump to conclusions. Don't do that. Give the candidate the benefit of the doubt. Assess them thoroughly in the moment during the interview. Don't make an assumption based on something you saw on their resume or the way they're dressed when they first walk in. Don't judge that book by its cover too much. You can be fooled in a bad way. So give the candidate every opportunity to earn the job while you're interviewing them.
And something that goes along with that, make sure you aren't making all of your decisions based on your gut. You should be using specific and measurable criteria for a lot of your interview questions. It's great to have intuition and it's great to have good feelings about your candidate, but make sure you're supplementing that with evaluations, maybe interview scorecards, pre-hire assessments, those types of things so that you get a good balanced view of anyone who's interviewed with your company.
I mentioned at the beginning of the video that one of the goals of the interview is to avoid legal problems at all cost. Make sure that you're not asking about things that you have no business talking about with a candidate in the interview and can absolutely get you in legal trouble. Age, race, marital status, sexual orientation. Don't go anywhere near those subjects. And if you're not sure where that line is drawn, familiarize yourself in advance.
Something that's easy to avoid is make sure you're answering candidate questions. Interviews go both ways. You might be asking them question A, question B, question C. They're evaluating you as well. They're looking to make sure that this is the right fit for them. They want to make sure that the environment is something that they want to be a part of. The culture is something that they value. So make sure you take the time to answer any questions they have, clarify any points that they might be confused on, and that will go a long way to making them feel really good about the interview.
And the last common interview mistake for today is failing to discuss the next steps. We encourage in our staffing business for candidates to ask about those next steps at the end of an interview. Don't leave without making sure you know what they are. We tell everyone that. But as the interviewer, you shouldn't force the candidate to do that. The burden shouldn't be on them. So make a plan in advance on how you're going to conclude and what you're going to say to the candidate, whether the interview goes poorly or goes exceptionally well. Make sure you communicate what they can expect going forward. So, Peter, I think that's it for today. Did we cover them all?
I think we covered them all.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.